officially. Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to have you guys on here. I'm sure some of you are sitting in load shedding and have to have your cameras off and have to be on additional power, which is so relevant for the topic that we're talking about today. So we're very excited to have Kasim Nakadu. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Kasim, are you there?
It's Nakuda.
Kasim Nakuda from the Department of Tourism. And we've got Craig Souls from the IDC that's going to talk to us a little bit today about the Green Tourism Incentive Program, the GTIP. It has been running for quite a while. Kasim will give us an overview of what they have done, and Craig will then go into the details of the program, the grant funding, how you apply, how you guys can benefit. And as I said, seeing that the chat is enabled, I will try to get it set up through the session. But I'm very actually happy to take people, questions from people if they want to question live. We also have the Q&A box, so please press, please put any questions in there. I will be monitoring it during the process. So yes, welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Craig and Kasim. Very excited to have you on board. Craig, if you can kick off the session for us.
Can't really hear.
Yes, I'm on.
Hi, Hanali, it's Kasim here. I'll kick off here with an introduction to the GTIP, and then Craig will come in on the details on how the program works after me, if that's okay with you.
Perfect, thank you. Go ahead.
Right. I just want to share my screen. All right, so good morning, everyone, and thanks to SATSA for the opportunity given to us to I trust that everyone can see the presentation on the screen. I'm just trying to figure out how do I'm sure that's visible. If that's okay, Hanli, can I just go ahead?
Yes, we can. I'm going to just pause your camera there. I know you are on load shedding and I see the camera freezes a little bit. So yes, there we go. Please carry on.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. So as indicated, my name is Kasim Nakuda. I'm from Department of Tourism. I'm responsible for oversight on the Green Tourism Incentive Program that we have partnered with the IDC in implementing for the tourism sector here. Just to give you some background to the GTIP. So basically in 2015-2016 financial year, that's government financial years, the department identified the need to establish an incentive program to stimulate the transformation of the tourism sector's approach to energy efficiency and also to improve the country's global competitiveness as a leading responsible tourism and low carbon destination. So whilst improved energy efficiency and a switch towards renewable and greener energy sources would counter the disruptive impact of load shedding on tourism operations, it would also help facilitate the implementation and application of responsible tourism principles. So there were two things we wanted to achieve. The one is responsible tourism principles, and also how do you counter the effects of load shedding on the tourism sector. What we realized as well is that on an enterprise level, renewable energy sources and improved energy efficiencies would further result in a sustained reduction in the operational cost burden of small tourism enterprises, and also ensure continued operational competitiveness in an environment of continued electricity price increases, as well as load shedding. And that's how the thinking came about in terms of the GTIP here. So prior to the GTIP being sort of made available to the private sector, we ran a pilot program to see the impact of energy efficiency programs on government-owned sort of state-owned tourism facilities such as Robben Island Museum, sand parks. There were 4 sites within sand parks like Skukuza, and also 2 Biodiversity Institute parks, basically. And the pilot initiative with all of these entities entailed the retrofitment of these facilities with solar PV energy generating systems, The department funded and oversaw the preparation, construction, and commission of 8 solar PV solutions that not only reduced the reliance of these sites on the national grid or on diesel generating systems, but also facilitated uninterrupted visitor experiences for guests and long-term operational cost savings for these facilities here. As an example, on Robben Island, we had installed a solar PV mini-grid system supported by battery storage that provides the island with energy even on cloudy days, and at night with diesel generation being used as backup here. So prior to us installing the system, Robben Island was running off diesel generators here to provide them with electricity at pretty much high cost, and also high factors of pollution basically on the island or over the island here. However, when we commissioned the system in around December 2017, Robben Island Museum then reported an average annual saving of 42% in diesel purchases here. And that also reduced their cost of electricity by around 40% here. And so the other thing is that at night, if there were not enough power in the batteries to support the island, then they would kick over to diesel. And that's why you only see a 42% decrease in diesel purchases. But that led to a savings of quite a bit of million rands in diesel purchases for Robben Island here. And the other thing is also that this was the first integrated mini-grid system that was put into an iconic tourism attraction in Africa. So that was quite significant at that time. Then in 2016, the department, together with the IDC, developed the implementation of the Green Tourism Incentive Program that would be available to the private sector here. The GTIP was launched in 2017 and was meant to be operational for 5 years until 2021 year. We initially capitalized the GTIP with 142.5 million rand in grant funding that's to be made available to the sector to assist with retrofitting their facilities with energy efficient solutions here. As indicated, the GTIP is managed and administered by the IDC. So all applications for the program are received, processed, and managed by the IDC here. Initially, when we had started out here, we had just sort of focused on energy efficiency solutions for the tourism sector. But then when we had the water crisis, especially in the Western Cape and other parts of the country, we then introduced a water efficiency solution aspect to the program as well. So it covers both energy efficiency and water efficiency. And the aim of the program was to encourage the private tourism sector to move towards more efficient use of energy and water resources, but also assist them in ensuring an uninterrupted visitor experience for tourists during load shedding or water shortages here. Also, it helps in reducing the input costs by bringing down the cost of electricity, and also by bringing down the cost of installing these kind of systems into a facility as well here. It also assists in increasing your competitiveness by bringing down your cost and allowing you to operate during times of load shedding. And so that also indirectly supports operational sustainability of a business during load shedding, and also long-term sustainability in terms of bringing down the cost of operating here. So the key objectives of the GTIP here was firstly to entice enterprises, tourism enterprises, to install energy and water efficient equipment in line with responsible tourism principles. And these are only private sector enterprises that can qualify for this. No public owned enterprises or entities can apply and qualify for this. The other thing was to address the market obstacle of high upfront capital costs and poor market awareness of the cost benefit of energy and water efficiency solutions. And here I'm talking about, assisting with actually overcoming the cost of putting in these solutions into a tourism facility here. Then also lastly is to facilitate the reduction in operational input costs of enterprises to counter the impact of electricity price increases and reduce reliance and pressure on the national electricity grid and scarce water resources. In 2020, we discovered that, there's a couple, so up to 2020, from 2017 to 2020, we ran the program here, COVID hit us, and during that time also we discovered that, there's a couple of challenges that we experienced with the program that we might need to improve. but also how do we use the GTIP to support the industry to a certain extent to overcome the COVID pandemic that affected the tourism sector significantly. So the changes we made to the program, I'll discuss just now. But initially, the applicants, the program initially, when it started here, applicants would qualify for 90% of the cost of an energy and water efficiency audit. This audit is conducted to assess the requirements of the enterprise in terms of energy resource efficiency solutions here. At that stage, applicants had to contribute 3,000 Rand towards the cost of that audit here, and we would pay 90% of the cost of that year. Then, if an applicant was successful with the application at that stage, we then provided grant funding equal to between 30 to 90% of the total cost of the approved interventions, capped at a maximum of R1 million per applicant year. All right. Then, after we went through a review in 2020, we then changed the following in terms of the program here. We, first of all, initially we had contracted the NCPC to do the audits of a facility to determine the electricity and water usage, and then also propose solutions for that facility here. Subsequent to that, we've now established our own panel of assessors through the IDC that work directly for us. So in order to improve the turnaround time in terms of the conducting of the audits here. We also went through a revision of the application process. We've sort of divided it into two parts, which Craig will talk about in more detail. But the first part is where you apply for an audit to be done. And the second part, if you're happy with the audit and you want to go ahead and implement the solutions proposed, then you can apply for the grant funding for the implementation of those solutions here. The other thing is that we removed the contribution of 3,000 Rand for the audit. So we cover the audit fully at 100% cost. And also we've then increased the minimum grant funding limit from 30% to 50%. So now, if you do apply, you can qualify anywhere from between 50 to 90% of the total cost of that solution. Of course, the limit of R1 million still exists here. The other thing also we introduced is that because to assist companies with their cash flow, we allowed implementation of the approved interventions over 24 months, basically over 2 years. And then we also extend the term of the GTIP basically to March 2026. So it was supposed to initially end in March 2021, and we extended it to March 2026. So we added an additional 5 years for the GTIP to be operational here. And then the final thing that we did recently is we also recapitalized the GTIP with an additional 130 million Rand. So in total, we've actually put aside 242.5 million Rand in grant funding to assist companies with their resource efficiency requirements and implementation of solutions in that regard here. Thanks. I think that's all from my side, and I'll hand over to Craig to take you through the detail of how the program actually works here.
Thank you, Kasim. Okay, there we go. Annalie, you wanted to say something?
Please continue.
Okay, great stuff. All right, good morning, everyone. So I'm Craig Sauls from the IDC. And I manage the team that is responsible for the implementation of the program from the IDC perspective. So as Kasim has said, the program was designed by the Department of Tourism, and we are partnered as the implementing partner. And hence, we would be a lot more involved in the day-to-day operations and also the application processes and approval thereof. I'm going to share my presentation, and some of it would have been covered by Kasim, so I'm not going to go through it verbatim. I'll skip whatever has been covered already. Finally, just give me an indication whether you can see this.
We have you, yes.
Okay, great stuff. I'm also going to turn off my video whilst I do this, if that's okay. Cool. All right, I think this is part of what Kasim has already covered in terms of the background to the program. This slide just gives an indication of the type of interventions that we would consider funding. So generally, it's renewable energy generating systems. The most popular ones that we know about is obviously the solar PV systems. However, this extends to any implement that actually covers the renewable energy sphere. We obviously look at the HVAC systems as well, in terms of the most efficient equipment in that environment. This literally covers anything in your establishment, from the type of lighting that you would use, to your water efficiency, speaking to the flushing systems that you potentially use, dual flush systems, aerated taps, shower heads that are more efficient. So anything that potentially can render your establishment more energy and water efficient is something that the program will certainly consider in funding your application. The likes of stoves. I mean, one of the biggest energy users you find is geysers and stoves. So we look at these interventions as well in terms of replacing with more energy efficient implements, such as gas stoves, solar cookers, heat pumps for geysers, solar geysers, etc. Obviously, it's not only about the hardware. There are easy wins that one can also benefit from, and that speaks to just how you manage your resources in your establishments. Right. So the program is a window-based application program, which means that we would open windows for a defined period. Up to date, we've opened 7 windows. The current Windows 7 is currently running, and this has been open since the 10th of October, and it will be closing on the 28th of Feb 2023. Generally, we have about 2 windows per annum that opens, and this just gives us an opportunity to process the applications that we do find in the application windows. So whilst we have the closed windows, we're basically processing those applications that have been received. So as Kasim has said, we now cover 100% of the resource efficiency audits. And also the grant funding has increased from 30% to 90% to now 50 to 90%. The cap of 1 million still remains. Applicants can elect to have either energy or water, or even both of these resources implemented at their, or considered for funding at their establishments. Because it's a proportionate grant, there is a portion that needs to come from the owners as own contribution, and that generally depends on what your percentage of grant is. How the percentage of grant is established speaks to 3 criteria, which I'll deal with a little later. To give an indication of how or who qualifies for this, so we would consider existing as well as new privately owned entities. When we talk about tourism entities, and this is, I mean, the key is that you need to be a tourism establishment servicing tourism clients directly. This speaks to accommodation, which is the most common one, but also other facilities and attractions that are tourism specific related businesses. New establishments can also apply, ones that are currently under construction. However, we do require that you are at advanced stages of the construction, and that there is minimal completion risk attached to your project. We do expect that at the funding phase, that establishments be graded by the Tourism Grading Council of South Africa. However, for the phase 1, which Kasim has alluded to, 2 phases, the benefit that we do then give to the tourism industry is that everyone can apply for phase 1 regardless of the grading. This is no longer a requirement at the first phase. However, it will be a requirement at the funding phase. Also, technically insolvent establishments will not be considered for the funding phase. However, they will qualify for the first phase of getting an energy efficiency or resource efficiency audit done for them. The audit is quite a comprehensive one that speaks to the interventions that could potentially then render your establishment more energy and water efficient. We would also require then, as part of that assessment, that 3 quotations are provided for the interventions that are proposed. Okay, okay, just the size of the companies that we're looking at this stage. Based on the Tourism BE scorecard, there's 2 categories that we look at. It is the exempt micro enterprises as well as the qualifying small enterprises. And this is really just based on your revenue of up to 5 million and then between 5 million and 45 million. This does come into play with your scoring model, where your percentage grant would be determined by the size of the entity as well. So there's 3 elements, and I'm sure it's covered some in the presentation, but basically 3 elements that is taken into account in determining your percentage grant. Number 1 is the size of the entity, which speaks to these 2 categories. And number 2 is the your BE levels. And number 3 is your level of savings that you achieve by actually implementing these interventions. Okay. So part of the assessment, especially on the first phase, we do require that applicants submit their historical consumption data for a 12-month period, as well as their occupancy data for a 12-month period, so that we have an indication of what the consumption patterns of the establishment is. This helps significantly with the audit phase, and kind of, just expedites the audit phase if we get this information quite clearly. But I'll also speak to that a little later in the presentation. So the bottom there, all applicants are required to submit supporting documentation. So this again is first phase application documentation required. So for the first phase, we've tried to make it as easy as possible, not too complex, not too onerous. So all you really need to do is qualify as a tourism establishment or tourism business. You need to provide us with your business registration documents. You need to provide us with your SARS verification PIN. In the past, it used to be a tax compliance certificate. We've done away with that. So it's your tax verification PIN. This is something that we have to get on the SARS letterhead, so that, or SARS official document, so that we do our own compliance test on this verification, and it needs to be compliant for us to consider assisting you further. We need annual financial statements. Part of the reason why we need the annual financial statement is, number 1, to see the size of the entity, whether you fall within this category, and number 2, to see whether you're actually a tourism establishment and qualify for the program. The other 2 elements, as mentioned before, is actually your 12-month consumption data, and then as well as your 12-month occupancy records. Okay, so for the funding phase, there's a significantly more documents required, and I'll run through that a little later in the presentation. But as part of that process, you would have to demonstrate economic viability of your establishment. So unlike with the phase 1, where we say even if you are technically insolvent, we would still consider your application should you meet all the criteria. However, for phase 2, where is the funding phase now, that would preclude you from getting the funding. Also, we expect that the establishments be graded. Establishments are required to specify identified interventions. So this is really just the auditors come through to your establishment. They do a comprehensive assessment of your establishment, and the idea is that we pick up any and all type of interventions that can assist in rendering you more energy efficient. However, this does not necessarily mean that you have to implement everything all at once. There's obviously a cost implication on this. There's obviously consideration to your contribution that needs to come through, and various other things could play a potential part in how you decide to move forward with this. However, we then require that you identify the interventions that would work for you at that point, and highlight for us to then consider funding those. The own contribution is required to be injected into the business first. So once we've gone through the process and you have an idea of what your own contribution would be, you are required to inject that into the project first before our funding flows through. So an example would be if you have an invoice for 1 million and you qualify for, and it's very simplistic, qualify for 70% grant, we would expect that the 30% flows into the project first, and then the remaining 70% from the grant then flows thereafter. There are also, obviously considerations in this regard. For instance, we do allow for entities to raise their own contribution from borrowers. So you may have FNB as your main bank or Nedbank, whichever the case may be. Oftentimes, these banks require that the deposits flow first. So in the instance that you do not have your own contribution available and you've approached your bank and the bank says, yes, we'll fund you the 30%. However, we require the GTIP finances to flow first. We would consider these on that case-by-case basis. So really just trying and assist as much as we can. Okay, and here was just that, as I was talking about the scoring model. So this is basically what is taken into account when we determine what the percentage grant would be. It's the impact of the proposed resource efficiency solution. So it's really what savings are you deriving from implementing all of these things. And the higher the savings, the more favorable for your position. Transformation and ownership as well. As I said, again, the better your BEE level, the more favorable for you. Size of enterprise, the smaller enterprises in this regard, the EME would render a better score than the QSE. Okay, and then also all applicants applying for funding will be required to submit. Number one is our resource efficiency audit, which we assisted you in putting together. So this is for the funding phase, obviously. That is number one. And then obviously FICA is one of the bigger things and one of the, not contentious, but one of the areas where we spend a lot of time in collecting data and trying to collate this data often becomes quite a challenge for the establishment. But it's FICA which we can't get away from. So these documents are required by law, and we need to then abide by that. We also have particular criteria for our service providers. So whoever you then decide to go with, they do have to meet the criteria of the service providers for the fund. Star grading certificate, as mentioned before, BE certificate or sworn affidavit, depending on the type of establishment you are, and depending obviously on whether you are owning the property or leasing it, you would require the lease agreement or proof of ownership. Again, that I'll also touch on a little later when we go through the application process. Okay. All right. So as part of the program, obviously we are trying to render the tourism industry a lot more energy efficient, sustainable, and we need that the establishments or applicants commit to those savings that have been set. So part of the process of assessing the establishment is to determine where you are and where we could take you. And we expect that you try and implement these so that we actually see the savings that we anticipated up front. There are instances where, the smaller non-complex interventions are things that you can kind of do yourself, like, let's say, changing your nozzle on your tap. These type of things can be considered for reimbursement if you do then, use your own funding to implement these. And that's just an emphasis that we need to use service providers that actually meet the program requirements, and we will get to a point where we actually run through those briefly. So the IDC, it's incumbent on us to screen those service providers to ensure that they actually meet the requirements. Okay, and this is just a service provider requirements, and I must be honest, I don't think anything is too onerous up to this point. Being a registered entity, that's a given. We need to deal with someone that actually exists as a business, needs to be tax compliant. Similarly, the entities need to be, applicants need to be tax compliant. In this case, we require a minimum level 4 BE rating. We do require suitably qualified service providers, and this is both for us and yourself, your protection. we require that they prove that they've been around for a minimum of 2 years, as well as that they've done satisfactory work, and therefore we request written references in that regard. They need to use products and components that are SABS or SANS approved. They need to offer the minimum insurance and guarantees, warranties, and certification for work performed. And these are standard things that one expects when you have these type of interventions implemented. The service providers need to be accredited with relevant statutory bodies, and this would be specific to the type of work that they're doing. So if it's a solar panel installer, he needs to be accredited in the PV environment. If it's a water installer, it needs to be accredited in the water environment. You know, just so that we cover ourselves again, ensure that we're giving a quality product with minimum issues anticipated going forward. And so we expect that they obviously align what we've approved at the adjudication panel. We align with that and implement those into the establishment as per the recommendations that have been put forward. Now, by this point, one expects that the audit assessor, the applicant, being the establishment that's being considered, as well as the installer, have already engaged quite significantly, and the interventions that have been proposed are the best fit for this establishment. So it should be minimum. There should be minimum chance of, once the installer comes through and tries to implement something, that he says, listen, something isn't working right or cannot work for this establishment, because we expect by this time that kind of negotiations, discussions have actually happened. Okay. This is just a very detailed description of the process flow, which I'm not going to go through. I think this is also incumbent. It is on the website. It is part of the brochure, so you can happily go and check this out on the website. What I'd like to do is just maybe, you know, take you through a kind of live example of how you get through this process. It's not going to take too long. I'm not going to complete the application forms, but just to show you that this, you know what, it may seem daunting at first, but it becomes quite simple once you get into it. Okay, so this is the link where you would find the process as well as the application forms, etc., whatever you require to apply to the program. And I'm hoping that everything will just work. Annelie, am I still, my screen is still reflecting?
You are still there. Applying for
okay.
Is the screen that we've got.
Great. Okay, so this is where you would be directed, and I think this link is also, the IDC link is also on the Department of Tourism website. When you scroll down, we basically tell you what the program is. We also then advise whether there's an open window or not. Currently, the application window is now open from 10 October to 2022, 10 October 2022, and will close on 28 Feb 2023. All right, so if this happens in a time when the window is closed, this phrase would have been changed to say the window is currently closed. So we do not accept applications. The one thing we have noticed is that oftentimes people would go into the system when the window is closed. So we don't block it, and maybe that's something we should consider. We don't block or stop these kind of tabs from being opened and engaged with. However, you find that sometimes when the window is closed, just based on, you know, process efficiency and learnings, we often update our application forms. And sometimes someone would have gone in the window when it was closed and opened up an application form, populated it. However, we may in the interim have updated it for a new window. So when we open the new window, we actually load new application forms. So what happens is, a typical example is before Windows 6, there was only, and it was a single application process. For the initial eligibility phase, there was only 3 documents required. However, with the new approach with phase 1 and phase 2, there are 5 documents required. A lot of applicants that use the old application forms would submit only what was required in the previous type of windows. And this kind of just delays the process because it becomes a to and fro. You've not submitted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's possibly based on an old application. So I know it kind of seems like, you know what, you may want to get things going in the interim whilst we assess other applications. But the fact is, it may be that you're working on an application form that is outdated. Okay, there's 2 application forms and it depends on the system that you're running, which one would work for you. And I'm just going to click on this one and hopefully that's going to work for me. Right, so this is the one and it says Excel for the web does not, but it does say download the file over here. So I'm just going to click download the file and immediately it downloads the file for me.
Yeah, Craig, that's it's not sharing onto the other screens. We've just got your PowerPoint.
Okay. So let me see if I do. So when did you lose me, Annelie?
We're still on the applying for funding. So when you click through to
No.
the site, it doesn't go through. So what you can do is maybe just stop sharing, and reshare and then share your entire screen. But probably a good idea to take off any confidential information so that we don't see that.
Long gone, long gone. I'm not going to fall into that trap again.
And thank you, everybody, whilst Craig is just busy getting himself back up again. Thank you for all the questions. I've captured what we've had in Q&A and on the chat, and I will be peppering our guests with questions as soon as we're finished.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that visible?
Yes, we've now got an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, good. So shame. It's unfortunate. I suppose you guys missed the whole process of getting there, but it's fine. It's just a link to the IDC website and then a link to this application form. All right, so this is the application form currently for Windows 7. We expect you to populate this application form, very simple information that it should be on hand. Description of services offered, very easy. And this does say phase 1 on the top. And I'm just going to enable edit here. Did that just kick me out?
Sorry, it did, yes. You might want to just share your screen again.
Okay. Let me know when I'm back.
You're back. Thanks, Craig.
Okay, good. So basically, this is the application form. It does say phase 1 on the top here. So at this point for phase 1, we expect you only to complete phase 1 specific information, which is this top section over here, up to where we say there. And this, as I mentioned previously, is the documents required for phase 1, simply business registration documents. So if you're a PTY, it would be your CIPC documents. If you're a CC, it would be your CK documents. Your valid tax clearance certificate. So tax clearance certificates no longer apply. We need a verification PIN. This is a similar document that you print from your SARS website that renders your, that gives you a PIN that we on the other side can then check the compliance via the SARS website as well. So this is an exercise that we have to do ourselves according to compliance. So I know some people then send a tax, the actual tax letter that says compliant. That's not acceptable to us. We actually need to do the check ourselves. Okay. Then we require your latest audited or reviewed financial statement. So this would change as well, because we do understand that CIPC does not require everybody to be audited or reviewed. And these are changes that have been brought about by CIPC. So we do not require that you are audited or reviewed either. You have to then provide us with your latest annual financial statements in line with what is required from CIPC. So if it's a compiled set of financial statements, then that is the financial statements that we would require. However, if you do require to be audited based on your PI score, then this would be required by us as well. Then we require 12 months historical consumption data. this data needs to correspond with your 12 months occupancy data that you provide to us. So the idea is that we're trying to correlate your occupancy with the consumption that you are actually using. And that is the end of phase 1 application and document submission. So this, you then just send through your application form completed up to this point with these documents, and there's drop downs to say yes, 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 yes. Often people say yes, and then the documents are not there. We actually do check. So it's not like we just take the application form, and if you've said yes, then it goes through to the next phase. No, we check the documents, make sure that it's right, and then we then advise that this is you've passed through the eligibility phase, or we require additional information, please provide same. If you do apply and you haven't provided all of this, you have up until the close of the window to provide the information. However, if after that cutoff you've not provided the information, that would then render your application unsuccessful. Okay, so if you haven't given us all of this information at the first instance, your application will not be registered. All right. If you give us all this information, the next step we do is we have to check that the validity of your tax clearance certificate. So your application, if you give us all of this, your application will be registered. We then do the compliance check on the tax PIN, and should it be non-compliant, we then engage with you to see if you can remedy that within the window as well. So if your application does come through, you've registered, but your PIN is non-compliant, you again will have up until the end of the window or the close of the window to sort out that tax issue. Sometimes it's just you haven't submitted something to SARS. If there's bigger issues, obviously we need to engage and see what the situation is. And that's the end of the application process or documentation for phase 1. Once this has been done, the process internally is that we have to then queue you for allocation. So we need to put you in line for an assessor to be appointed to your establishment. They then come through and do the assessment. And once they've concluded the assessment, draft a report and present it to yourself. You need to be in agreement with it and present it to us. Only once the final report has been issued are you qualifying for phase 2 or the funding phase. That is now when you kick into this next section of the application, which is section B. All right, and then you need to complete section B with all the information requirements. These financial statements, as part of the documents required, we expect to populate also projections, because remember we spoke about viability. This is the only way we can assess the viability to see whether we actually have, once we've actually populated this and made some assumptions and projections. Again, below we have a checklist of the documents required at this stage. And again, we expect you to comply with this. What we do though is once your phase 1 is complete and you have received your audit report, we do send this to you in an email that kind of highlights the things that you require to provide for us for the funding phase. So here we just say FICA documentation. However, there's a particular affidavit or FICA compliance checklist that we then provide to you so that you know exactly what is the information that you require to submit to us so that we can consider your application for phase 2 or the funding phase. Just a disclaimer at the bottom here: tourism establishment and prospective applicants to the green tourism are advised to be wary of people purporting to be representatives or agents of the program. So we haven't appointed any consultants, agents, or representatives. If there are engagements on this, it would be either the IDC or the Department of Tourism. This does not preclude you from using agents or consultants. However, it's not endorsed by us. And because it's not endorsed by us, these costs implications would be borne by the applicants entirely. Both the costs and any risks associated there too are borne by the applicants. What we have done of late is, because we do see some people or consultants applying on behalf of establishments, like we said, this is entirely on the establishment or applicant's shoulders. And just to cover ourselves, we request that such consultant issue some kind of a consent letter from the establishment or the applicant to say that applicant XYZ, I, applicant XYZ, appoint this consultant, Mr. So-and-so, to run with this process for us. That just gives us a bit of comfort that yes, you know what, you understand that this is not something that we've endorsed. However, you commit or you agree that you're going to go this way anyways. What we also require is that you know, when they do engage with us, that they at least include the applicant on the email correspondence, so that we at least have the applicant in the loop at all times. And that, I think, is all on the application process. It's really just document collation and submission to the GTIP@idc.co.za website. I'm not sure there's anything else I can tell you at this stage. Kasim, do you think I missed out on anything that maybe I should highlight?
I think we're fine for the moment, Craig. I think let's wait for comments and questions, and let's tackle it through that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks, guys, for your time. I think I took a little longer than anticipated. Sorry there, Annelie.
Absolutely not a problem. I have one entire page full of questions for you guys. Thank you very much for the participants. Craig, thank you. Yes, stop sharing the screen. Okay, let me start off. Firstly, the biggest question is everybody would like to know if you will share your presentation so that I can distribute it to everyone. Kasim and Craig, would that be possible?
Only from my side, the answer would be no. But purely because the information that we've actually gone through there is in the brochure.
Okay.
So
you
we
will
basically
send me,
said that,
yeah?
yes, we can send you the brochure. Basically, this information has been taken from the brochure and put into a PowerPoint presentation format. Perfect.
Perfect. So if you guys would share, Kasim, I see you unmuted yourself. If you will share whatever you're able to afterwards.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So we will share this. It'll be a webinar recording plus the whatever presentations and brochures we have on the topic will be shared with everyone. Those of you that are not part of the SATSA newsletter, please send me your email addresses. It's hannelie@satsa.co.za. I did put it in the chat earlier, just to make sure that you are kept up to date. I will also make sure that all of the people who have attended today will get that. Okay, so let's get into the questions. Now, some of these might have been answered as we were going along, but I think it's good to just repeat some of that. I think the biggest question is around the 28th of February. Whether this is too soon, in your opinion, to get all of the documents together for somebody that wants to start the process now. And also a question is, when will the next window then be open after that? And is there any possibility for an extension? So that was Sharon, Martin, and Ruben. Kasim, I'm not sure if you're the person to answer this.
I think
Kasim?
One?
Sorry, you broke up there a little bit.
Okay. Craig, I'm sure Craig could answer that on behalf of the program. Craig, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, sure. So number one is the window is closing on the 28th of Feb. And I think we're going to stick to that deadline for now. I don't believe that you've run out of time at this stage. Like I said, the information that is required is reasonably simple information for phase one. It's that application form that needs to be completed. You need to provide us with a CIPC document for proof of registration. You need to provide us with your latest annual financial statement. So if your financial year end is Feb, those financial statements are required is for Feb 2022. At this point in the game, you should have had them prepared already. Then it's occupancy data for 12 months, which could be the occupancy data for your prior 12 months, January to December, as well as your utility bills for that period. These are all things that are not, I believe, rocket science to procure. You should have them on somewhere. Your tax compliance or tax verification PIN, again, this is something that you just go in if you have the access to e-filing and draw that letter from the e-filing system to get the PIN. I think the complexity will come in if your PIN is non-compliant. But at this point, that is not an assessment. It's really just for the submission of documentation, and we then assess the compliance. And you know what, I think we have a few non-compliance coming through, but the majority of them are compliant. You know, so I think it's worth it for you to just, you know, take a half a day and collect the information and send it through.
Sure. And then
as for
Craig?
future windows, yes, Annalie?
No, please carry on. You were still busy answering.
Okay. So as for future windows, Kasim, I'm going to ask you to answer that one. But yes, we certainly are looking at future windows in the short to medium term. Kasim?
So yeah, so yes, we will open more windows. I must say that you know, it will confirm it to our website, but the next window is planned to be open on the 1st of April. So even if you miss this window, you'll be able to you know, apply on the 1st of April for the next window. Subsequent to that, we try and structure the windows so that we open up one on the 1st of April. And another one around September, the 1st of September, yes, so that it doesn't sort of disturb the peak season of the industry, basically. So we're expecting 2 windows per annum, and of course these will continue for as long as there's funds available.
Thank you so much. Sharon just asked whether you have to submit phase 1 and 2 documents or forms at the same time.
Simple answer, no. So phase 1 is phase 1, and that's what you need to comply with for phase 1. And remember, I mean, these are 2 phases where you may qualify or not qualify. You know, so I would say focus on phase 1, get those documents through. Let's see if you pass through the eligibility phase, and then start working on phase 2 once you're in the eligibility phase or you've been approved for the audit assessment. Absolutely fine. Yeah. But it's just better for us to have clear, focused information for the phase that we're dealing with at this stage, so that, you know, we can sift through that and get it done quicker.
Yeah. And Nelly, I think I'm going to answer correctly, but Sim and Craig will help me. So phase 1, the window closes, phase 1 starts, and then phase 2 automatically happens regardless of the window being closed.
So correct, in the sense that it's called an application window for phase 1 and the eligibility assessments. That's phase 1 really. Once you are compliant or you qualify for phase 1, even if the window closes and you then apply for the phase 2 funding, this will then happen in the process in the background. And this is the reason why we potentially have windows as well. It gives you an opportunity to process what has been happening in these closed in the application windows. So just to give a quick sense, and this is really process, and we try and refine them as we go along. The way the process has worked is that when the application window is open, we're actually collecting applications up until the point that it closes. And once it closes, we start assessing these applications for eligibility, etc. Whilst the team is also then concluding the funding phases of previous windows. However, this obviously means that someone that has applied on the 1st of October waits until the end of Feb for kind of an eligibility outcome of his application, which is not ideal. We're trying to refine processes so that we can kind of look at these things as and when they come through the door. But what that does mean is that we may assess your application much earlier in the window. However, now the next phase or the audit assessment that is allocated may not happen as immediate as you anticipate, because now you've got an outcome on your application. Yes, you meet the eligibility criteria. We need to appoint an assessor. So we're getting quite a bit of push from applicants. So when am I getting an assessment done? When am I getting an assessment done? The fact is we're actually dealing with assessments of prior windows whilst this application window is open. And you know, the ordinary process would have been that we only start looking at your application at the end of the close of the window. But be that as it may, we're trying to streamline the processes. And we are trying to get through these things a lot quicker, and we just you know, request that the applicants are just patient with us in this process.
Yeah, thank you very much, because that's actually one of the questions that Dennis asked. He had submitted in November 2022, so I think that gives him a good answer. We are not going to have time for all of the questions. I've captured everything that was asked. We will do a quick Q&A that we will share with the actual presentation. If there is anybody that has an incredibly burning question, perhaps you want to just quickly raise your hand and I will give you a minute to talk. Otherwise, all other questions will be answered via Q&A. Anybody? Let me see. I've got 2 attendees' hands. Let me just close this one here. I'm going to put you in first, and then I've got Wayne and Jorg, and then I think we will call the session closed. So Quentin, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, and thank you for setting up this very constructive meeting. I just wanted to see, do the gentlemen have any insight into what the rebates are likely to be that were alluded to in the SONA presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. Kasim, Craig.
Hanley, sorry. No, we don't. I mean, that will, I think, be pronounced in due course by National Treasury, and it's not done by the department. So we're only focusing on this program and not the rebates announced in SONA. Thanks.
Okay, but good question in any case, and we will try and see if we can get an answer for you on that in any case. Wayne, I know you had quite a few questions.
I apologize, Anneli. Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, gents. With regard to the application form, when I went online, under the business entity or type in that, it comes up with PTY, etc., but it doesn't give you the option of MPO or MPC. And when I phoned the IDC and I spoke to a certain lady, they had no idea what I was talking about and been sent pillar to post, and it was made very clear that any information that is not listed on the application form, your application will not be honored. So do I just Tipex it in on my screen, or what do we do?
We have funny people in tourism, Kasim and Craig, you should know that. Thank you so much, Wayne. That is a question. Craig, I think that would probably be more directed to your side.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I think we need to consider the application that Wayne is talking about. So we talk about economic viability and profitability of companies. So one is to look at this NPC and NPO and what the structure of this is. You know, because by virtue of being the NPO or NPC, it doesn't render it a profit-making type of environment. Kasim, I'm not sure if this was anticipated at all, you know, initially. But I think that's a critical one. I mean, we're looking at PTY, CK's profit-making businesses. We now obviously also are presented with sole proprietors, partnerships that are not incorporated, these type of things, but inherently profit-making businesses, because we talk about that sustainability. So I'm not going to say discount it entirely, and I think I'll ask Kasim just to come in there. But one is to look at, you know, who is this NPC or NPO as well, considering that we are talking about privately owned as well. So yeah, I think that's as much as I can give. It was anticipated that these are the applicants that we are looking for, and that's what the drop down incorporates.
Yeah, so NPOs and NPCs were not considered when conceptualizing the program here. It was aimed more at the private sector, registered companies that have financials that show some sort of viability here. It could be graded as well here, you know. So, you know, it all depends on whether the NPO, NPC meets all the requirements of the program here. And then we can look at it. So because there's so few, it's an unusual case for us here. We'd look at that on a case-by-case basis here. Whether it meets the program, we'll still have to consult internally to see, you know, whether we'd accept something like that or not here. So it's very difficult to say yes or no now. But yeah, Craig, if he wants to submit an application, since there's no facility that allows an NPO to apply in terms of the type of business, what would he do? Maybe just that guidance here, then maybe that application can still enter the system, provided it meets all the requirements, and then we can take it from there once it comes to adjudication or something like that.
No, absolutely. I think, like I mentioned, one of the other areas of ownership is partnerships, but that's not listed in the drop down. So I'm happy that you submit the application. Look, it's not there, and we'll consider maybe putting something in as the new window approaches. But you know, make a just qualify your little thing there as NPC somewhere, but submit the application. Similarly, there's registration documents for NPCs and NPOs. Submit those as the business registration documents. We'll pick that up as complying with that point. Like I said, this application is more a bit of a checklist, you know, just to ensure that yes, you're happy and you comply with all of these, so that at the other end we can have a look. But it's not a matter of we look at this and say, okay, this thing says PTY or whatever the case, and we just make a decision on that point. So really just, you know, ticket PTY or whatever the case may be, submit the registration document, because that's what we actually do, is look at what has been submitted. And we make a call based on that.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig. Perhaps what we can do is just put some email addresses where, you know, sometimes it's easier to talk to a person than to go through a call center or do it via email. If that is possible, that would be great to share. And then we have Jorg that's going to ask a question now. Thank you, Jorg.
Hi, good morning. It's really a great program. I'm quite interested in it. So simple question, how long will it take, or would it take, to apply for the program and to get a payout as an average for, let's say, a solar plant? A month, half year, 2 years?
Yeah.
I mean, I need it for planning, you know. If you say half a year, I need to get my funds. If it's 2 years, it's a different story.
It's very difficult to give you an indication. And again, I'm saying that we do try, and we are trying to streamline the processes significantly throughout the process. And as we go along, we refine, you know, certain areas in the program. Like I said, with the applications window, the current window, we try and assess them immediately so that you know exactly where you stand. Yes, you comply or not. But there is still a process of these audits that need to be allocated and assessed. These audits do take quite a significant amount of time. You know, we have limited, and this is not the problem of the industry, but we have a panel of assessors which need to get through this. You know, and only then can they kind of, can we as IDC put together an assessment or submission document for approval. You know, I mean, we have seen the window that closed as at the end of March. We've already seen some approvals come through as of January. So if you want to do a simple calc, you can say April to Jan. That's how long it's taken them to actually get an approval. I think that's some of the first ones that we've seen coming through. The only reason for that is because of this audit process that's happening in the background. We are seeing a lot of the audits being concluded now, so a lot more of them are going to be assessed and potentially submitted for approval or consideration. We're trying to cut that down. You know, we are trying, everything we do is trying to be more efficient in the processes. And we're certainly going to try with this window that we're closing at the end of Feb to even be more efficient with those, to try and get those approvals through as quick as possible. So it's very difficult to say, but we are trying to push them through as quickly as possible. We're trying not to get to the 2 years, that's for sure.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Last question quickly. Let's say everything has been approved. Could I still say I need a half-year time for installing that solar plants, for example? Or once it's approved, you have to spend the money immediately?
No, so yes, thanks for that question. So once it's approved, you have a 24-month implementation window. You know, to cater for whatever you need to do. I mean, this thing is not a quick and easy implementation. There's ordering of whatever it is, solar PV, starting that process, you know, getting the interventions or the equipment, installing those, etc., etc., etc. You may also, or you are allowed to implement in stages as well. So you may choose that at this stage, I can only do this now, and after 6 months, do something else. So you have a 24-month window. We obviously want you to implement as quickly as possible, because you know, the program wants to see the interventions hitting the ground. We want to see it hitting the industry and really see the benefits of those after those 2 years. So the sooner the better for us, but you do have a 24-month period.
Thank you so much. So now I'm a little bit hesitant to actually close this webinar. We had scheduled it for an hour. Craig and Kasim, I'm not sure what your diary looks like, but we still have quite a few people online and there's still quite a few questions. So perhaps we can, Kasim, I see your hand is raised, but perhaps we can continue if there is time available.
Yeah, we can continue, Hanli. I saw one question on the chat here that I was a bit concerned about that I just want to address quickly here, that where somebody had indicated that they've read that this program has moved to the NEF here. I just want to confirm and clarify that no, it has not. The IDC, as per my presentation, are the implementers of this program, and they manage it on our behalf. And so it has not at all changed to the NEF. And I'm not sure where that information came from, but let me correct that quickly. Thank you.
So if we, please raise your hands. I see Wayne has got his hand up. He was the one that asked that question. But Martin, you asked a question about when work can commence. Please just raise your hand and we'll just carry on an open session. Those of you that have to leave, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate it. But everybody else that's happy to sort of stick around and chat. Wayne, you can go. Just unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you. Kasim, yes, thank you. That was from me. When I spoke to the IDC it was last week or the week before, they told me that the NEF is now handling it. And yeah, but thank you for confirming. It's back with the IDC.
Yeah. Can I just come in there?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Kasim. So I do understand. So I think what generally happens is the IDC does have a call center, which generally deals with the entire IDC spectrum of products, but the focus will always be on the IDC mainstream business units. I would request that those who have queries for the GTIP specifically, touch base with us via the GTIP website email address, which is simply gtip@idc.co.za. What the call center does do, if you mention GTIP, they know of us and they will forward that through to the GTIP email address. But sometimes when you talk about, and remember we have had other tourism programs with the IDC. We've got a strategic business unit with the IDC that deals with tourism. So when someone approaches them and talks about tourism, they potentially think IDC tourism business unit. They may be, and this is what they might speak of when they respond to you. But my view is when you mention GTIP, that's generally what comes directly to us, but you can also touch base with us via the website, via the email address, and one of the GTIP guys will actually then respond to you.
Great. I have quite a few people. Let me see. Rainier, Martin, Wayne, I think that might be an old hand. And then we have Andrew Rathray. You guys are welcome to just carry on.
Okay, I'm happy to go first if you can hear me.
Thank you, Andrew. We can.
Just a question. If one's got an entity that has two properties operating obviously in different parts of the country, can one submit 2 applications or can it only be 1?
So the application is for a specific entity. So if it's ABC Pty Ltd, and ABC Pty Ltd has 2 establishments in its in the group, then it's 1 application that you're submitting, and there's 2 establishments that need to be considered. If it's 2 separate entities, then it would make sense for 2 applications because they're different Pty Ltds. However, we will have to look at it and consider as well as a group how we structure that. So simply put, 1 Pty Ltd with 2 properties, regardless of whether they are in close proximity or two different provinces. It's one application, but the information that we're going to submit needs to be for both of them. So if we're talking about occupancy, we need to understand the occupancy of both establishments. If we're talking about utilities, we need to understand those for both applications. Business registration documents, it's one business, right? So if it's two establishments or two entities applying, similarly, it would apply then the information for that entity and all its occupancy and consumption data, as well as for entity 2. I hope that's clear.
Okay, thanks, Craig. So then, in terms of the funding, would that be then capped at from that entity's perspective at $1 million, or would it be $1 million per trading as property, if that makes sense?
No, it will be capped at $1 million for the entity applying.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And just I mean, an entity can apply in all of the different windows, or is there a limit to that? I'm now throwing questions in, but Rainier and Martin is also still waiting.
Hanley, you're going to have to clarify that one for me.
So as Andrew said, now they've got the two different properties. So in the current phase, they apply for one of their properties and it's capped at $1 million, and then they apply in the second, whenever your window is open again for the other entity.
So if it's two separately registered entities, in terms of they're operating from two separate companies, then nothing stops you from then applying in a different window for company 2. If it's one entity that has two separate buildings in it, we would still consider that cap, regardless of what the window is that you apply for. So if you apply for building 1 in window 7, and we do consider the interventions, when you come back in window 8 with the same entity, we're going to have to take into account what have we done in the past, what has happened, and consider that cap, because we don't want any loopholes creeping into the system.
Understood.
Thank you, Craig. I love how, and I know working with government, there's so many hoops that you have to go through when there is money involved. And you sometimes wonder how people get away with what they do. Not in your side, obviously, but anyways, Rainier, sorry, I might have pronounced that wrong.
Yeah, thank you. We have here a PV system already installed with a 1.5.
Apologies, Rainer. Can you just unmute yourself again and maybe start? Sorry, I just accidentally muted you. Rainer, there we go.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we've got you, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a PV system already installed with a 1.5 years ordering time in front of it, and we've paid for it, but we found it is not enough, so we need more panels and another battery. So that's a two-tier story. Can I apply for the already installed system as well, or could I only apply for the extension of it?
Yeah, thanks. It would be the latter. So it would be for the extension of it. So we would not reimburse you for systems that have been installed in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rainer. Martin. Martin, if you just want to press that unmute button.
Okay, there we go. All right, Hanley and everyone else, welcome and thank you very much. It's nice to have this session. Yeah, look, our situation is that we are earmarking a program, but now obviously this would delay the program if we are going to apply for funding. So would it be possible to actually do the application and then commence work, or do we have to put everything on hold until we get approval?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. You would obviously be doing the work at risk, number one. I'm not sure whether your service providers meet the criteria. I'm not sure whether the interventions, once our assessors have a look at it, is in line with what they would anticipate. But suffice to say, that is a risk that you're taking. We would consider, once the application has at least been kind of, gone through an assessment. It's gone through the eligibility assessment. It's something that we can consider. The fact is, it's at risk. Again, it speaks to, reimbursing work that's being done. That's not really what we want to do. But if it's really a matter of, okay, I've applied for this, it's a matter of time. This is taking a little longer than anticipated. I'm going to take the risk of doing this. Our audit assessor comes through and can identify that this is in fact what was in, kind of the plan, and it was really just a matter of timing. Then we can consider that. But it is at risk, and we would hate for one to go through a process thinking that they'd get some funding and not get them at all.
All right, noted. So, but again, if the assessment has already been done, it would show sort of goodwill and good faith to that we are anticipating doing the program. It would be a benefit for us, but obviously, I do understand the risk aspect.
So here's something that I think we sometimes overlook in this application process, and maybe whoever's online here, just take heed of this. I get the idea that you've already gone through a process. You've actually done an assessment of your establishment, and hence you're saying that, you're kind of running with this already, which gives me a sense that there has been some kind of an audit assessment done. The criteria does allow for phase 1 to be either applying for an assessment or a review of an assessment, right? So you can give us the information that you have, and if you have an audit assessment or resource efficiency report that's been done by someone for you, and it indicates these are the type of things that we're looking at, generally it's there's a couple of things. It's really, what methodology was used to come up with your kind of interventions. What are the interventions? What are the type of savings that you are benefiting from the interventions? These type of things that need to come through in the report. And I'm happy to share. I just don't have all. It's 4 or 5 bullets. If you have something like that already, that can be submitted with your application documents for phase 1. We can then try and get an audit assessor on our side to review that for us. I think that's going to short circuit the assessment process on our side. It will be easier to do that than for them to do an entire assessment on their own. Because, for instance, some people have gone out and they've done, they've had the loggers there for a week, they've had their assessments done, etc., but they actually don't think about it when they apply. And this is allowed by the program, that you render the information you have, and we do a review of that so that we can see, are we on the same sanity check, reasonableness check, and we can maybe get to a point where we actually get yours, through the process a lot quicker than having that assessment done. And this is not, some might think, but you kind of giving someone else a favor over me. No, it's not. If they have that process concluded as well, this will help us to get through these things a lot quicker, and benefit you as well. So I think that's maybe the approach that you should take.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I think that's very helpful, and that's certainly something that we will highlight. I see we have one of our now media colleagues, Dale, in the room. Dale, I hope you're going to do a nice little article on this one. Is there anybody else with hands raised? I don't see anything further. Any further questions? You've got a few seconds to raise your hands there. I've got a hand raised, but I can't see where. Kenilwe. Hello. Hi, how are you? You were just on.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody can hear me.
Good
morning. I'm doing great. I'm enjoying this this conversation, interaction, and I'm excited because this sounds like a really great initiative. From my side, I think he's already addressed what I asked earlier in terms of the 5 million turnover, whether it was a minimum or maximum requirement. So I think he's answered that, because my thought is that post-COVID, I don't think any SMME has made that much yet. So yeah. But another thing, yeah, he speaks about what is it? Audit assessment. With the previous speaker saying that maybe he can take whatever assessment he had done, attach it to his application and have it submitted. So mine is not so much of a question, it's actually a comment, and I'm glad this is not being done just by IDC, and the Department of Tourism is here as well. So maybe in future, or maybe going forward, whatever programs that they introduce, for example, this one, where there's audit assessments and things, can they also look at the businesses and do some form of audit to say that here's the business, yes, everybody struggled with COVID and everything, and things got messed up, but this business here is worthy of saving and it's got potential, and let's see how we can maybe ease restrictions, you know, when it comes to such businesses that are still bruised from COVID-19. Because I spoke to a few people, I think it was last week, on the Satovito group, where people were saying, you know, some of these things, they look good on paper. I applied for a grant for COVID, whatever, and I'm still waiting, never got a response. And I just hope that this is, yeah, definitely not going to be one of those, because, yeah, I can see the excitement and the interest in the group. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenilwe. I think you bring up a reasonably good question there, is in light of the pandemic of the last 3 years, are there any potential in, you know, taking some of the requirements or being lenient on some of the requirements? Kasim and Craig, I know that that's a very difficult question, and the answer is probably no, but maybe you can weigh in here.
I think if I may, sorry, Craig. So when reviewing the program in 2020, we have taken into account the impact of COVID on businesses, and that's why we're giving more funding towards assisting the installation of those solutions here. We've reviewed the program to see where we can cut down, but, you know, sometimes there are certain things that you just can't get away with here. You know, you have to be tax compliant, you have to be a viable business here, because we also have to be responsible in terms of how our money is spent. You know, so whatever requirements there are currently in the program here, and I think Craig can come in to say, you know, we've looked at this over and over and again and say, you know, what can we cut down? What processes can we do away with? I mean, believe me, our aim is not to make it difficult, but it is to make it easy. But also we have to make sure that our money is spent correctly and in line with what is allowed in terms of government policy here. Craig, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Kasim. I mean, just to add on to that, Annalie, you said the answer is absolutely no. I'd like to say that the answer is actually yes. We've actually done so much to try and accommodate businesses because of what's happened. Our assessment has kind of evolved with the business. We accept that, you know, one can't look at those COVID years as a reflection of the business. Part of viability would be looking at profitability, you know, which was a key component of a viable business. But we know what's happened in COVID years. So our assessment extends to what was this business doing before COVID? Was it a good business? What has COVID done to it? At this point, we are, let's say, 12 months beyond COVID. A full financial year. Feb, I think, will be one of the first full financial years post-COVID, if you can really call any period post-COVID. But how have you recovered from that? Yes, we don't look, and we're not trying to look at your revenue and say you should be at the levels you were at pre-COVID. We consider where you are and how you're moving towards that level. Again, you may be loss-making at this stage, but we need to consider, are you loss-making as a result of what's happened in the industry, or is the business actually just failing? These are considerations we actually do take into account. And we have changed the way we assess things to take that into account. the requests or requirements from a documentation perspective, and I know it sounds like I'm simplifying things, and I've had that discussion even at the one Satu Vito conference or workshop that I attended. It seems onerous, and sometimes sitting in Sandton, it seems very easy for these things to come through, but it's really document collation. And if we can get guys on the ground in these specific areas to try and assist our businesses in these different areas to actually collate this information, it will go a long way. But certainly from an assessment perspective and being a little a lot more lenient, that's absolutely the case. Thank you.
I love that, Craig and Kasim. That is just, you know, I think TIP is one, GTIP is one of the really flagship funding or grant initiatives from the department. So we are incredibly happy to have had you guys here. Thank you so much. I know so many people, and you know, some of them have become really good friends that work in government, and I know that you put your heart and soul, and you're there because you want to make South Africa. And this program certainly does. So thank you very much. Thank you to all of the attendees. Thank you to everybody sticking around for a little bit extra. I'm glad we could extend it, and thank you for the extra time, Craig and Kasim. If you have any final words.
No. Thank you, Annelie, for putting this together. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that last minute rush applications from the 100-odd people that were on the platform. But no, thank you for the time. Cheers.
Such a pleasure. Thank you very much, Kasim.
No, thanks a lot for the opportunity, Hanli, and I mean, thanks for the question. I mean, you know, we are here to serve and to engage and to help clarify it, and this was a great opportunity in that regard. So we truly appreciate this initiative of yours here, and we look forward to more of these here. It's like in different parts of the country or different forums as well. Yeah, but thanks a lot for the opportunity, and good luck to everyone with your application.
Thank you very much, guys. We will try and do these webinars as soon as that window opens for the next round. Have a fabulous day, have a fabulous weekend, and we've decided as SATSA that the word recovery and all of those things are negatively connected. So we're just in a thrive year. This is our year to thrive, and I hope all of you do that. Have a wonderful weekend and day. Thank you.